Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. And today we are looking at Arcades the Strategist. So Arcades is a 4-mana Bant creature. It's a 3/5 flyer with Vigilance, and it's got two abilities that are going to be relevant for how we're going to build around it. So the first one is whenever a creature with Defender enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. And each creature you control with Defender assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power and can attack as though it didn't have Defender. So we've seen wall-centric or Defender-centric decks be viable in primarily Pauper, although we've also seen them show up in Modern occasionally, but this is going to be the EDH version of that. So obviously with Arcades, we're going to want to play as many creatures with Defender as possible so that we can draw cards when they enter, and so that we can have a board full of potentially powerful attackers, since often toughness is not going to be valued as highly as power, meaning we can potentially get really high toughness for a relatively low cost and then beat our opponents to death. So, to go through it, of course, in category order, we have the usual Esper Sentinel, Lorien Revealed, which is here more as just a way to search for lands that's also a card draw spell. And then Mystic Remora and Mystic Study, Sylvan Library, and then Recycle, which I think should be far more of a staple than it is in EDH. This is 6 mana, and it makes you skip your draw step and reduces your max hand size to 2. But whenever you play a land or cast a spell, you get to draw a card. So it lets you churn through your deck a lot. And then since you get to keep 2 cards at least in your hand, it means that you'll always have the fodder for either a land or another spell to get the chain going again next turn. So we've seen how powerful a card like Song of Creation is in the decks that can play it, like Song of Creation Storm in Modern. And this is a, albeit more expensive, but monocolor version of that spell that can go in any green deck. So I do think that Recycle and its color-shifted black version Null Profusion should be much more staples than they are. So then moving on, we have our combo cards. So our primary combo card is going to be Axebane Guardian. This is a defender that taps to add X mon in any combination, where X is the number of defenders. So clearly, we're going to want to tap this for mana and then have a way to untap it, and then tap it for mana again to make infinite mana. So our untappers include Freed from the Real, which can untap it for a single blue. Pemin's Aura, same thing, different abilities, but still includes untapping it for a single blue. Galvanic Alchemist, which soulbinds with it and untaps it for 3, so 2 and a blue. High Alert, which can untap any creature for 4. Seed Cradle Witch, similarly, untaps a creature for 4, also gives it +3, but that's not really that relevant. Staff of Domination, which untaps a creature for 3 and untaps itself for 1. Umbral Mantle, which untaps the equipped creature for 3 and equips for 0. So, any of these untap effects, we just need to be able to make at least more than or a lot more than however much mana it takes to untap. So for cards like Freed from the Real and Pemin's Aura, we just need one other defender in play. We can tap this for double blue, and then untap it, leaving us with a single blue, and we can then make infinite mana of every color. For more expensive cards like Galvanic Alchemist, we obviously need more mana than that. So for Galvanic and Umbral Mantle, we need 4 defenders in play, so this plus 3 more defenders. For High Alert and Seed Cradle Witch and Staff of Domination, since we need 4 mana, we need to be able to tap this for 5. Now, once we have infinite mana, we can win in a number of ways, but particularly we've got Secret Door. So this is a creature with Defender that has 5 mana to venture into the dungeon. Since dungeons include an ability to drain our opponents, we can activate this infinite times, going through the dungeon and draining our opponents for 40 and killing them. Or win in other ways. For example, Staff of Domination allows us to draw a card, so we can draw our whole deck and win in other ways besides specifically this. We can have Umbral Mantle. If we have a way to attack with our defenders, we can put Umbral Mantle on any of our defenders that can tap for anything, and then tap and untap the defender over and over and over to make it infinitely powerful. So Axebane Guardian plus any other defender that has a tap ability, just move the Umbral Mantle around and give them infinite power. Similarly, Seed Cradle Witch will do the same thing. We can just generate infinite mana and then target all of our creatures to pump them infinitely. And then High Alert, of course, allows us to attack with our defenders and makes them assign damage equal to their toughness. We're going to be seeing more of these type of cards. Also, obviously, we always have access to Arcades, so once we get infinite mana, we can just play Arcades and then attack for infinite, as long as we have the infinite loop plus Seed Cradle or Umbral Mantle or just anything else that pumps their power. Then we've got some counter spells. I'm mostly going to have these decks be playing a minimal amount of counters just as demonstrative purposes, but you can obviously include more counters if you feel the need to in your particular metagame. Mostly, I'm going to have a low amount of counters in combo decks. So this is a combo deck, so obviously I don't feel like I need as many counters as normal, but obviously you might need more counters if your opponents are playing more disruptive game plans, especially any decks that are playing their own counters or are playing stacks effects like Rule of Law. So then here we've got our list of defenders, so I'll go through each of them. So obviously Axebane is our combo piece. This is going to be our main combo piece. Overgrown Battlement does the same thing as Axebane, but it only taps for green mana, which means you can only combo it with the combo pieces that don't require blue. So it can still go infinite with Umbral Mantle and Staff of Domination, but it can't go infinite with Freed, Galvanic, Pemenzora High Alert, or Seed Cradle Witch. And obviously it doesn't produce blue, so it doesn't make infinite mana for Secret Door. We have Crashing Drawbridge, which gives our creatures haste. It itself, unfortunately, doesn't have haste, nor can it be activated immediately, but if you have this ahead of time, you can potentially play out your combo, activate this to give everything haste, and then just go off immediately. Surly Caretaker is a bad mana dork, but it is a defender that produces mana for only one. We've got Shield Sphere. This is just a 0/6. If you block with it, it puts a -0/-1 counter on it, but you just don't have to block with it. This is in here primarily just to be a free defender so that you can get out additional defenders without having to pay for them, which is important for things like Axebane and Overgrown Battlement to tap for more mana. We've got Stalwart Shield Bearers, which is a 2 mana 0/3 that gives other creatures you control with defender +0/+2. So for anything that allows our defenders to attack, it pumps their toughness, which will allow us to attack for more damage. This is basically an Anthem for +2 in this deck. We've got Sunscape Familiar. This happens to be a defender, and it gives our green spells and blue spells, reduces their cost of green and blue. So most of our other cards are not white to begin with, and all of our combo pieces are primarily just green and blue, other than the colorless ones, but mostly they're green and blue. So this reduces the cost of all of those. So it's kind of like a Sapphire and Emerald Medallion rolled into one creature that also happens to be a defender, which is relevant for Axebane and Overgrown, etc. Sylvan Caryatid, Ulvenwald Captive, Vine Trellis, and Wall of Roots are all defenders that can produce mana. They're obviously not the most efficient cards that we could be playing, since they're not 1 mana dorks that we would have access to otherwise, but it's important that they all have defender. And we've got Wall of Blossoms and Omens. These are just defenders that cycle themselves. And then Walking Bulwark, similar to Crashing Drawbridge. This is a way to give our creatures haste. It does suck that we have to pay 2 to give them haste, but it's good that we can play this and activate it immediately, which we cannot do with Crashing Drawbridge. And we don't have to give all of our creatures haste. We only have to haste up the combo cards, again, primarily Axebane and Overgrown Battlement. And then once we have infinite mana, we can then just haste everything else. Then we've got some fast mana in Elvish Spirit Guide, Jeweled Lotus, and Lotus Petal. We've got more haste granters in Concordant Crossroads and Lightning Greaves. Again, this is going to be important to make sure that we can combo as fast as possible. Various Bant lands for the deck, including a Dryad Arbor that we can Zenith into. Also Gaia's Cradle, of course, almost always going to be in every green deck. Cavern of Souls. I think this is basically a staple at this point because most decks do require their commander either to combo off or just to generate a bunch of value. So I think Cavern of Souls is going to mostly be in. And then the rest of the lands are basically what you'd expect. Fetch, Dual Shock, Battle Bond lands, Rainbow lands. Of course, Cavern and Lightning Greaves act as protection, Veil of Summer as well. Then we've got all of our ramp, which includes, of course, our defender creatures, but includes non-defender creatures as well. So Avacyn's Pilgrim, Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, Noble Hierarch, Wild Growth, and then, of course, Sol Ring, Monocrypt, Mox Diamond, Chrome Mox. Very little removal. We don't need removal because we have a combo deck here, but we can use removal if necessary. We've got some Stax pieces. Occasionally, it's going to be relevant to Stax our opponent out with Rule of Law effects. Now, this does possibly prevent us from going off ourselves, but a lot of cases, we may only need to cast one spell and then maybe one other spell. So, for example, if we have, let's say, an Axebane Guardian in play, and then we get a combo that makes us go off with the Axebane, right? Like, let's say we have Axebane plus Staff of Domination. Then we can just draw our whole deck, and then we may have a way to either get the Arcane or the Archon of Emeria either off the table, or just be able to go off next turn and have tons of protection to allow us to do that. So, Rule of Law creatures, potentially a Nombo. You could remove these if you find that they're too much of an obstruction. Similarly, we've got our 3 Null Rod effects, Collector Oof, Null Rod, Stony Silence. We're not playing too many artifacts ourselves and we don't necessarily rely on that much artifact-based ramp. If you look up here at our ramp, most of our ramp is not artifacts, and we can always just play them later if we need. Like, most of these come down really early, and then we get most of the value out of them already. It is a non-bow with artifact-based combo pieces like Staff and Umbral Mantle, but we do have, of course, other ones. It's also, Secret Door is also an artifact creature, so it does stop that one as well. But if we go off and have infinite mana, then we should have a way to just get our Stax pieces off the board anyway. And then, of course, Drannith Magistrate, pretty much going to be stock in every single white deck. Rip, because we don't need our graveyard to win in this deck at all. Cyclonic Rift as a sweeper. And then we've got all of our tutors to go find all of our pieces. So Birthing Pod, Eladamri's College of Evolution, Enlightened Tutor, GSC, Mystical Tutor, Neoform, Survival of the Fittest, Wargate Worldly Tutor, and Drift of Phantasms, which searches for any of our 3 mana value combo pieces, and is itself also a defender. I doubt you'll ever wind up actually casting this. You're probably just going to transmute it most of the time. But if for some reason you wanted to play this, it does happen to have defender. So that's going to primarily be the Arcades deck. So again, you're looking to do one of 2 things. Either generate an infinite mana combo, usually with Axebane Guardian, although you can also sometimes do it with Overgrown Battlement, and then either draw your whole deck or just find a way to infinitely kill your opponent, with the primary outlet being Secret Door, or pump your entire team, allow them to attack via Arcades or maybe High Alert, but Arcades will do it too, and then just attack your opponent to death infinitely. Any which way you look at it, you're usually going to have a combo that involves Axebane Guardian in play, although there are other ways to win, but this is going to be the main focus of the deck. And that is Arcades the Strategist.